Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to God's glory and that of his kingdom. We have lots of enemies, it turns out, and lots of need to protect our country against them. Perhaps the most vexing part of it all is how little we seem to understand about the true nature of these problems, especially at the level of the federal government of the United States. We are concerned because we're told there is this huge threat from domestic terrorists of the white supremacist kind. And we understand that our government's national security, homeland security, law enforcement agencies have all been dedicated to the task of trying to protect us against that particular threat vector. Turns out that may not be the problem that we've got at all, or if it is at all, it's in a small way compared to a much more serious danger that is now impending. Specifically, that arising from the desire of anarchists and Marxists and others willing to work with them to take down our country, to seize upon this impending Supreme Court decision about abortion rights, to initiate what is being called a new summer of rage, one that may make the one of 2020 pale by comparison. A man who has been generous with his time, indeed is a regular of this program, is one of our country's foremost analysts of, commentators about, and real duty experts on these various real threats to our country, including notably those within the United States itself. His name is Charles Sam Faddis. He is a longtime national security practitioner, both in the United States Army and in the clandestine service of the Central Intelligence Agency. He has run for Congress. He has written a number of important books, including Beyond Repair, The Decline and Fall of the Central Intelligence Agency. And these days, he writes a brilliant column at Substack for And Magazine, an incredibly important resource on all of these issues. And we're always delighted to have a chance to visit with him, pick his brains, and figure out what the real threats are and what we best be doing about them. Sam, good to have you back in the house. Welcome, sir.
Always great to be here. Thank you, Frank.
So, Sam, you've written a couple of really important pieces that I wanted to draw on in our conversation today. You have warned about this outfit called Jane's Revenge. I think when you were with us last week, you talked a bit about it. Give us an update, if you would, on how this threat to not just, you know, those who are in favor of the pro-life position, but to the country as a whole that seems to now be in the offing, awaiting this decision, presumably sometime in the course of next week.
Well, I mean, I think in order to understand the threat that Jane's Revenge poses, and which is supposedly tied to this issue of abortion and the impending decision of the Supreme Court, is to understand that this is a direct outgrowth of, in fact, involves essentially all the same people that set fire to the country during the summer of love, so called, and have never gone away. And this is not a handful of individuals, and this is not peaceful protest. This is very well organized nationwide effort. At the core of it are expressly Marxist organizations. And as I always say, I use that term very deliberately. That's not just a pejorative throwaway term. These are folks who actually want and say all the time they want to destroy the existing social, economic, and political order. It is half of the stuff they write Joseph Stalin could have written, or Lenin before him, or Mao. And they have now been allowed, not just allowed, encouraged, pushed to, financed to use violence as a tool for the political left, as Marxists typically do. And nobody's ever paid any price for that, and none of them have those organizations have ever been dismantled. And they are now locked and loaded and ready to go to town as soon as this decision comes down. So what you're going to see is not a few protests that get out of hand. What you're going to see is very deliberate, orchestrated nationwide violence. They've already thrown Molotov cocktails in windows and so forth.
And the immediate targets may be those providing pregnancy counseling and the like, but they clearly have a bigger game in sight. And Sam, I think you mentioned that there's a connection here to the Revolutionary Communist Party of the USA, which again could hardly be a more explicit Marxist enterprise. Remind us of that relationship, and to what extent is there a failure to regard these people as real threats, real domestic terrorists on the part of this government?
Well, the Revolutionary Communist Party USA, as you say, is a little breathtaking, because when you go to their site and you read their stuff and you watch their videos that they do online, you're like, good Lord, guys, couldn't you hide your agenda a little better? I thought you were supposed to be sneaking around. I mean, you're punching me in the face with the fact that literally you want to destroy everything and create a USSR in the United States. And that's not exaggeration. They have actually created a series of, if you will, sort of front organizations or facades. There was one they created, a Rise Up to Resist Fascism, I think is the title, that they created back in 2016 to fight Donald Trump and the MAGA movement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the RevComs. Well, not just the RevComs and a series of other outfits that are just like the RevCom. And now
The
they've got
revolutionary
this.
communists. Mm-hmm.
Now they're rising up to against abortion rights. And their current organization that's organizing all this is exactly the same thing. I mean, all the people that are out there talking, speaking, are straight out of the party. So it is the Revolutionary Communist Party and some other groups like Liberation Road that are all of the
Mm-hmm.
same ilk.
Mm-hmm.
They just put this, what sounds like kinder, gentler name, but it hasn't changed their agenda one whit.
But are they being recognized by the FBI, by the Department of Homeland Security, by our intelligence agencies in which you served, as a threat, an enemy within problem that is violent at its core and has, as you say, these revolutionary purposes? We hear a lot of talk in this January 6th commission, of course, about insurrections and overthrowing government and the end of democracy, but this sounds like the real deal.
Well, I mean, I think the FBI, to be fair, is really busy because they got to investigate all those parents that have the audacity to show up at school board meetings. So,
Indeed.
no, look, I mean, all kidding aside, I'm sure there are people at the working level who recognize exactly what's going on. What is the official position of Homeland Security, FBI? They're doing absolutely nothing about this. They are not focused on it. I mean, if you can go on the internet and find the express objective of the RevComs in about 5 minutes using Google or DuckDuckGo, presumably the FBI, without breaking a sweat, could be inside this organization and tear it out by the roots.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not doing it, and obviously that reflects a conscious decision not to do it.
Yeah, and to instead focus on this manufactured threat of
Right.
white supremacism
Right.
and Christian nationalism and so on. Sam, we have to take a quick break. I want to come back to some very interesting research you've done on the attack on our schools, speaking of those school boards, and the effect it's having on advancing this revolutionary communist USA agenda. That and more with Sam Faddis right after this.